Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Raising Cane studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Raising Cane studio downtown in the capital city on this Monday. I hope your work week's off to a good start. Gorgeous day down here, and we got tons to talk about over the next couple of hours. 3 guests to help us do so. Wilson Alexander from The Advocate covers LSU football. Had a great piece run in The Advocate online yesterday about Brian Kelly's time in Baton Rouge. He spoke to a number of folks in that football program or former members of that football program and kind of got the ins and outs of why things went the way that they did for Brian Kelly in Baton Rouge. We'll talk to Wilson in 15 minutes. Also have our sports health segment coming up at the end of the hour with Dr. Jeremy Burnham as Jaden Daniels is hurt. In the second hour, we'll talk to Denton Day about the National College football scene. Lots and lots to do. Frank Wilson's on the mic. It's Bama week, by the way. We'll get into some of that, but let's crank things up the way we do every single day. It's our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Well, the Saints lost again. 34-10 was the final in LA. It was not nearly that close. The Rams stopped the Saints 3 and out and then went right down the field for a touchdown in which Matt Stafford did not throw an incompletion and never looked back in that 34-10 rout of New Orleans. And as I was watching the game on Sunday, it just kind of became evident to me that I was looking at something that I didn't need to talk about the game on Monday. And that's not the way I entered the day on Sunday. I entered the day on Sunday going, okay, this matchup is terrible, but it is a new quarterback. It's the start of potentially a new era. This is a segment I did last week. Like, I don't have high hopes for this, but it is possible that you're going to find a spark here. You're going to find something to push off the dock. And I want to be very clear. The point of this segment is not going to be to disparage Tyler Shuck and call him a failed draft choice. That's not it. But something has become abundantly clear to me over the course of this start to the Saints season. We're 9 games in, you're over halfway. And we spend all this time talking about the quarterback. Should it be Rattler? Should it be Shuck? Rattler does this. Shuck does that. Rattler was drafted by them. Shuck was drafted by them. Here's all the training camp reps, and this is what Rattler did, and this is what Shuck did, and here's the preseason. Here's Shuck's stats. Here's Rattler's. Well, they're going to go with Rattler. When should they switch to Shuck? And that's a reasonable conversation to have. It is vital in the National Football League to come up with a franchise quarterback, and the Saints are searching for one. So for us to have had those conversations is correct. It is no longer the most important conversation to have. Some have been on this boat for a while. I'm now firmly on it. We don't need to talk as much about the Saints quarterback. Here's what we need to talk about. The Saints have sunk a ton of resources into their offensive line. Eric McCoy, second-round pick. Cesar Ruiz, first-round pick. Trevor Penning, first-round pick. Kelvin Banks, first-round pick. Talaiasi Fuaga, first-round pick. They're not any good on the offensive line. They're not. They don't run block well. They don't pass block well. They don't control the point of attack. They get penalties. They're bad on the offensive line. I think Banks could be a good player. I think Fuaga could be a good player. McCoy doesn't stay healthy. The 2 guards are not any good. They're not good on the offensive line. They've sunk a ton of resources into their defensive backs. Alontae Taylor doesn't cover very well. Kool-Aid McKinstry, year 2, doesn't cover very well. At safety, you went and signed Jordan Reed. I don't see a lot of impact there. You got Jonas Sanker out there, makes some plays, other times misses tackles. But Matt Stafford picked that group apart yesterday like they weren't even there. Like they weren't even there. Those first 2 drives, he didn't throw an incompletion. That's the part of your team that's supposed to be good. You've sunk all those resources into it. It's not good. Brian Brzee, first-round pick, can't stop the run at all. None. Your wide receivers do not make plays. They drop balls every single week. Juwan Johnson couldn't come up with one yesterday. Olave does it pretty much weekly. You cannot run the ball at all. Can't run it at all. I have gone through the entire roster outside of the quarterback and an aging linebacker in Demario Davis. I've gone through the entire... It's all bad. There is not a single position group on this entire Saints roster that is even approaching league average. Not one. Not one. You can look at Pro Football Focus for grades. You can look at statistics. We went through all the statistics last week. Saints, offensive line, running the ball. It's all awful. Statistic after statistic, grade after grade. ESPN Advanced Analytics, the record of 1-8. This roster is awful. And the worst part about that, you can have a bad roster. It's a rebuild. We've talked about it. The worst part about it is the group that put this roster together, that identified Cesar Ruiz, that identified Trevor Penning, and identified Chris Olave and Alante Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry and Brian Brzee and all these guys that represent maybe the worst roster in the NFL. The group that put that together, Loomis, Ireland, Harley, the whole front office, they're the ones in charge of getting the Saints out of this. Why would anyone believe that's a realistic possibility? That's what Gayle Benson would have to sell you. That, hey, we got guys in charge that are going to do a good job. Oh, really? Look at the roster. It's not just figuring out a quarterback. It's not that you've got a first-year head coach that's finding his way. You're not good anywhere. And that's become so apparent in watching this team week after week. The Bears ran it down the Saints' throat whenever and wherever they wanted to. Just wind sprints down the field. Yesterday, Matt Stafford had a cup of coffee every time he caught the snap and then threw it to somebody that was wide open. You don't do anything well on defense. Offensively, yeah, like you've got quarterbacks who are reading elementary coverages and they're dumping the ball off and checking it down and you're not explosive, but you can't run the ball to help them. You don't block to help them. Your wide receivers can't help them. Your overpaid tight end drops the ball every week. Every single position group on this team stinks. And that is such an indictment on the personnel department above Kellen Moore. And these are the guys that are in charge of getting you out of it. Because make no mistake, like the only way the Saints can get out of this is if you draft well and spend money properly. And this group drafts poorly and spends money horrendously. It's you have no chance. I didn't do this segment in August when it was the same roster. I did not do this segment in September when it was the same roster. I didn't do it in October. But now you're starting to get to the second half of the season. This is where Kool-Aid McKinstry supposed to be making plays. He's getting gashed. This is where Alante Taylor is supposed to be growing up. He's not. This is where you're supposed to see Tallahassee Fawanga and Kelvin Banks assert themselves. They have some good reps. I'm not calling them complete failures at this point in their career, but I'm concerned. You spent money on Juwan Johnson and Alvin Kamara. They're not helping much. And I don't think it's Alvin's fault. They don't block. But is that a good investment? You've got these old heads in Cam Jordan and Demario Davis. They're moving on. Tyrann Mathieu just did. What are you replacing them with? I don't know. Chase Young's the only guy on this roster that is playing at a super high level. He's it. Chase Young is the only bright spot on the entire roster. That's the problem. It's not that Tyler Shuck had a pretty sad day yesterday. It's not that the Rams smoked the Saints. The Rams are really good and the Saints stink. It's not that you're 1-8, but when you watch the product on the field and then you understand that the only way that it's going to get better is if the people that destroyed this rebuild it, that's not going to happen. And you've got an owner who I don't believe cares. I don't think she cares. I've never spoken to Gayle Benson. She never talks to the media. So there's no hard and fast line from her that I can go off of. But no organization is run like this. No organization bottoms out, consistently doesn't make the playoffs, embarrasses himself to the 1-8 record, which is the worst in the NFL, and there's nobody that suffers any consequences for it above the head coach. No one else in the NFL operates like that. Everyone else makes changes, tries to do things differently. And the Saints like, oh, well, back in 2009, that was 16 years ago, by the way, back in 2009, we were really good. We were awesome in 2009. Then there was a run there in the 2010s, and right there in the late teens, we had a heck of a team. Yeah. You had a Hall of Fame quarterback and a head coach that was making personnel decisions, and those guys propped up an organization of what is essentially now going to be looked at as failures. I don't have another way to look at these guys. Because if you could have a rookie quarterback that was really struggling or a second-year quarterback that was turning the ball over like Rattler was the last couple of weeks, but if you were getting after it up front, if you had one of the best run defenses in the NFL, or if you had a couple of guys on the corners that were really locked down, or you had an all-pro left tackle, there was something to cling to here. You've got nothing. There's nothing to cling to in New Orleans, and it's because of Mickey Loomis. And I waited on this, and I didn't have it was not in my mind like I'm going to do this when this is coming. I just wanted to watch it play out. I don't see anything New Orleans does that is even league average, and Mickey Loomis is in charge of the entire roster. And for an ownership group / owner to look at that and suggest, oh, we'll just keep it rolling. Come on, Mick. It's just ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. It's unfair to the people of this state. It's unfair to the people in New Orleans, and I feel for you badly. Y'all know, like, I'm not in the foxhole every Sunday with y'all. It's like I can't speak to it in the same way that I speak about LSU. But I can call it what it is. And this is an embarrassment, and the hope that this is going to get a lot better is fleeting. And that's sad because it is a proud, proud state in a proud, proud city, and right now there's just nothing to be proud of. That's a bad spot to be in. Jordan, I'll give you 90 seconds here.
All I want to say is you're 100% right. I mean, I felt crazy people dissing me saying how I felt about Mickey Loomis, but the writing was on the wall. You lack everything. Honestly, you just lack talent. That's the simplest way to put it. You just lack talent at all phases of the game. I'm not going to say I have questions about Kellen Moore just yet, but 16 minutes of possession for a full NFL game is crazy.
13th lowest in the history of the sport.
Insane. So I can't – it's year one with him, but year two is I'm extremely close eye on him. So I have nothing to say about the Saints anymore. I got to deal with the Pelicans. It's just too much.
Who owns the Pelicans?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I think it might be Dale Benson.
Sweet. You know? That's awesome. The worst team in the NBA and the NFL. That's actually impressive to pull that off. That's not easy to do.
It's a double whammy.
She's pulled it off. All right, when we'll come back, we'll transition over to more good news. LSU fired its football coach last week. Wilson Alexander spent the week combing through those 4 years and wrote a great story on The Advocate. We'll talk to him about that next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Last week, undoubtedly, one of the most tumultuous in the history of LSU football. Coach fired midseason, athletic director parting ways with the university at the end of the week as well. Wilson Alexander covers LSU football for The Advocate. He wrote a story talking with 15 people associated with the LSU football program about the Brian Kelly era. You can read that online at theadvocate.com. Wilson, give us some time here on this Monday. Wilson, thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me, Hunt. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Let's talk about what you were able to uncover last week. Obviously, with Brian Kelly's time in Baton Rouge coming to an end, what were you curious to learn as you started to do some digging?
I guess the cliff notes of it would be that a lot of what we sort of heard, a little chatter behind the scenes over the past few years, really was what a lot of people felt like was going on within the building. That Kelly did not connect well enough with enough of the players. And I want to emphasize enough, because there were some players I talked to who thought that they had a solid relationship with Coach Kelly. One who even said he had a close relationship with Coach Kelly, but he acknowledged that may have been because he was a captain. Brian Kelly had those sort of weekly meetings with the leaders of the SWAT team, little pods and all that, and then things were supposed to kind of be disseminated through. And it felt like to a lot of people he just did not, as one person said, try hard enough to really get through to the full team the way that he should have, and that he was a little bit too detached. Brian Kelly has this CEO style of doing things that has worked for him in the past, but in order for that to be successful, you have to surround yourself with great assistants. And LSU, as we know, was always having some kind of issue on one side of the ball or another, special teams, defense, and then now the offense. And so it never all came together at the right time, and he was not able to correct those things. And eventually he just lost a lot of support, and I think that's because he didn't have the relationships that he probably needed to. At least that's kind of how it was explained to me.
As you kind of had your conversations, I guess the question I would have as a reader and someone who's following the team is this just Brian Kelly's personality or way he does business, or is it a lack of effort in that department? What's your sense on that?
It's tough to know for sure. And I think it's also a matter of probably people's opinion when it comes down to that one. Like, there might be some people I talk to who think that he didn't maybe put his full self into it. There was one person who I talked to who didn't make it into the story, but because it was just his one viewpoint on it, was that Kelly started to become a little bit more checked out after the 2023 season, and there was this sense among some people on the staff, like, man, that was their chance, and but I don't know that that's that everybody felt that way. That there were other people who that is kind of just his personality and way of doing things. One person even thought that maybe it was intentional, that he was a little bit detached from the team because he wanted to kind of keep certain things at arm's length. And so part of it is the way he went about it. Part of it may be a little bit of slipping in effort, but that's a matter of, I think, individual opinions, and it's really not just like one general consensus around that.
And being a football coach, you hear stories of coaches that get there at 5:45 in the morning and don't come home until midnight, and the amount of hours that some put in. And then there have been folks that have talked about Brian Kelly's hours. Were you able to kind of uncover what that was like in terms of his presence in the facility and around the team day to day?
I asked a lot of people the question, was he as absent as his reputation was? And most people sort of said, like, I think he was here a lot. That he was within the building, but he wasn't seen much, or as much as they would have liked to have seen him in the building. As one current staff member told me, my first 4 weeks here, I didn't see him. And that staff member said he might have been here, but sort of sequestered in his office. Like, I just never saw him. They would have liked to have seen him more often sort of throughout the building. Another staff member said that basically Kelly, when he was around, and he was having individual conversations, I actually heard this from multiple people, that he was good to interact with, but it wasn't often enough, that needed to be more regular, that they didn't have regular staff meetings as much as one person who worked at another SEC school had when he was at that SEC school, and that's a very successful SEC program. And so those were some of the things that I gathered in that regard, that there were others, though, that said like they didn't think that he was there nearly enough. Then there were some people who said he was here, he was working hard, he just was kind of detached from people within the building.
Wilson Alexander is our guest, LSU beat reporter for The Advocate. As you've covered this entire run here for Brian Kelly, I mean, what is your thought on Brian Kelly's time at LSU? And let me ask it this way, because I feel like, for me, as I've talked about Brian Kelly, I feel like he did make an effort to make a lot of different changes and do things differently. He fired defensive staffers and overhauled that. He put a new personnel department in place. He donated of his own money to try to change the way that they approach recruiting with NIL from the we don't buy players and now going out and getting the number one portal class. Like, I thought he tried to make changes from afar. What's your sense on how he handled his time here in Baton Rouge?
I thought he really tried to make it work, and really I thought he did put a lot of effort into trying to get this program to a place of consistent championship contention. But as I gathered over the past week, like, the way he went about it, just maybe, so many people talked about fit. Brian Kelly didn't fit here over the past 4 years, and some of that felt a little overblown, but I think there is some truth to that he didn't come in and truly embrace the things that can make LSU great. He tried to sort of do things the way he had always done them, his sort of foundational pillars, as he sort of once said. And those, but to a degree, he sort of lost some of the things that can really make LSU great. And like there was one creative person, one former member of the athletic department who commented on like the past, LSU's branding around what Brian Kelly's football program was going to be. And that was that they had come up with that, but it was something that Brian Kelly kind of wanted them to come up with. And he was like, man, that was way too corporate for what LSU should be. I do think that he tried. It just didn't quite mesh the way that he went about doing things in the program. It just didn't quite work out. And I think that if he had hired better assistants throughout his staff, and maybe at the very beginning of his tenure, maybe if he hadn't gotten rid of some people that he did, or at least replaced them with people who were a little bit maybe operating at a higher level, and LSU was able to have a good offense and a good defense at the same time for once in his tenure, that this probably would have worked out okay, even with all the sort of questions and criticisms of his way of doing things and his sort of personality and detached style.
I saw Hugh Freeze penned a note to the Auburn family and posted that on his social medias. And so I clicked over on Brian Kelly just to kind of see, and it was radio silence. Do you read anything into that at all, or am I just digging?
I'm not really sure what to make of all that. No, I wonder. I just keep wondering when are we going to hear from Brian Kelly? I don't know when it will be. That could also be, there's still negotiations going on with the buyout. Maybe something that has something to do with it. I'm not really sure.
What does your gut tell you about the next month with Frank Wilson at the helm of this football program?
Frank will do everything he can to try to energize these players, kind of galvanize them, sort of pick them up, emotionally. Things over the past month were just the vibes were off, and I think that he's going to do everything he can to try to get them to play free and loose, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, I don't expect them to win the Alabama game. Arkansas's got a great offense, but their defense is terrible, so that, and with that 11:45 a.m. and kickoff in Tiger Stadium has the potential to be pretty close. I think that Frank will, do everything that he can, that an interim coach should do in this situation in terms of trying to re-inject passion and energy and that kind of feeling back within the team, and we'll see how it works out.
Wilson, I mean this sincerely. It was great to see your byline back in the newspaper. Welcome back to work. We've been thinking about you, and we'll see you out there, okay?
Appreciate that, Hunt. Thank you. You
bet. That's Wilson Alexander with The Advocate. Great story you can read there at theadvocate.com on just what happened with the Brian Kelly era. It's a great story. I've also made a few phone calls and kind of dug around a little bit and kind of just to see kind of some of the same things that Wilson has dug into. And so I'm going to give some of my thoughts because you heard when Brian Kelly was fired, like my initial thoughts as to why things didn't work. And I want to add on to that with some of the things that have been discussed here over the last 7 days. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back and do more of that.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is the website. Every car that is on the lot is online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com. It's America's best warranty. I tell you about it every single week. You talk about an industry-leading warranty and the peace of mind that gives you every time you buy a new Genesis. You've got a new vehicle bumper-to-bumper warranty, 5 years, 60,000 miles, bumper-to-bumper. We all know that dealing with maintenance on a vehicle is no fun. If you've got that warranty, it gives you the peace of mind to know that they got your back there at Genesis. 24/7 roadside assistance. Again, they've got your back. You will have roadside assistance wherever you are, whatever time of day or night it is, if you buy a Genesis. You've got valet complimentary scheduled maintenance, 3 years, 36,000 miles, meaning they'll come to you, get that vehicle, bring it back in, handle the maintenance, drive it right back to you, complimentary. It's that kind of customer service, that kind of peace of mind that goes with a luxury brand and a wonderful line of vehicles that happen to be among the safest on the road. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge, their airline at Pico, so you can go by and see them, or you can check out that inventory online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
All right, moving along here. Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Hope your work week's off to a good start. Appreciate you hanging out with us. 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Got Denton Day coming up in hour number 2. Also got to check back on my SEC picks against the spread. Talk about what went on in the Southeastern Conference over the weekend. So we'll do some of that. World Series was a classic over the weekend. May touch on that as we move forward as well. But I want to react to kind of Wilson's piece, but also just the fallout of the last week as far as the head football coach at LSU is concerned. When Brian Kelly was fired a week ago Sunday, I came on Monday and talked about why I thought it didn't work for Brian Kelly at LSU. And essentially, my feeling was that his ability to surround himself with the best coaching staff possible, those failures ultimately doomed him. The recruiting staff he started out with was not good enough. The defensive staff he started out was not good enough. And by the time he flipped the defensive staff over, things slipped on the offensive side of the ball. And you just never found that balance. I think this LSU defense with this coaching staff is probably good enough with that 2023 offense to be what you need to make a run and maybe win a national championship. I think that LSU was pretty good on offense the first couple of years. I think they threw the ball well last year, but they couldn't run the ball last year. And it just, you never had all the, it's like whack-a-mole. You never could whack all the moles at the same time. There was always one or two issues that were popping up. And I think that I ultimately pinned that on the coaching staff as a whole from start to finish. That was my feeling. And the reason I said that is because there were so many rumors flying around about Brian Kelly, and that's what happens when things start to go south. Like, there were comments all offseason about Hugh Freeze on the golf course. He was asked about the golf course in a press conference because that was what was flying around Auburn so often. And that doesn't happen if you're winning. It only happens if you're losing. Nobody in Gainesville in the 90s was talking about Spurrier playing golf and going to the beach because they were scoring 55 a game and beating everybody. But when you lose, rumors start cooking and people start talking and things start flying. And that's on last Monday. I wasn't willing to go into that. I was going to go with what I knew. And I knew that the staff configurations start to finish left a lot to be desired. And Kelly was going to need that because Kelly, it wasn't going to be necessarily his offense or his defense. He was going to run the program from the top and let the assistant coaches handle their recruiting, handle their game planning, handle their in-game calls, and win that way. And he's made a career out of that. We went through all the coordinators that he's had in his time. Went through the Clark Lee and Mike Elko and Marcus Freeman, and Mike Denbrock and Bob Diaco, and all these guys who have done great things in football. But it just didn't feel like it worked. And that's what you could immediately point to for sure. It's not rumor who you hired. We know who you hired. That's evident. And so I didn't want to dabble in that unknown space, right? But I thought, well, now that it's over and people are more likely to talk, let's see kind of what we can find out. And I want to be clear as I get into this. The rest of this segment is going to kind of be opinion-based. And I think I'm going to be careful not to overstep. I don't think I'm going to go beyond where you should go or speculate too much or rely on hearsay too much. But I'm going to give you kind of my opinion after some conversations. I believe Brian Kelly came to LSU with the intention of winning a national championship. I believe Brian Kelly thought, if you can get it done at that level with Les Miles and Ed Ogeron, with my track record, my background, my confidence level, I can do that too. Maybe even at a higher level. I think that's what he thought about LSU. I also think that running things at LSU is not the same as running things at Notre Dame. And you've heard a lot in the last 7 days about former players being, quote unquote, welcomed back in. From what I understand, it wasn't that Brian Kelly shut out former players. That's too strong. It's that they weren't welcome with open arms, just kind of come on in. And that's kind of the way that it's generally been. No, you can't have 20 guys out there every day at practice popping in and cutting up and sitting in the meeting room. No, but that's not what we're talking about. But there was a little bit more structure to it in terms of setting appointments and signing in with people, and it made players who were used to the other way at times not feel as welcome. That's one little piece to this thing. It wasn't that Brian Kelly said, I don't care if any of these guys ever come back. It's that there were protocols put in place that hadn't been there for people to be at the football facility. And so Frank Wilson has kind of said, hey, I want y'all to come in this week. Come on, come talk. As far as whether or not he was playing too much golf, I talked about this last Monday. T-Bob sent out a tweet that he heard that he played 400 rounds in 4 years at a local country club. I addressed this last week, but I'll briefly do it again. I know people at that golf course. I know people that are there 4 and 5 days a week at that golf course. I promise y'all, Brian Kelly was not out there playing golf all the time. He was not playing 100 rounds a year at that golf course. He just wasn't. I've lived the 100-round of golf per year life. I did that in 2018, 2019. It takes a lot. You're out there a lot. This is not pop in, pop out. This is 5 hours at the place. I promise y'all, if Brian Kelly was playing 100 rounds of golf a year at that golf course, I would be able to verify that. So he may have played some golf. And I'm okay if the head football coach wants to play some golf. I'm okay if my attorney wants to play some golf. I'm okay if my neurosurgeon wants to play some golf. It's okay if some people play some golf. You don't need to be playing golf on Tuesday afternoon of Florida week, and I don't think Brian Kelly was doing that, okay? People that spend a lot of money at LSU are at that golf course. It's not like you can go do that incognito. So I think that's probably overblown. As far as whether or not he was in the office, I think Wilson said it best. He was reporting on that. He told us that in the last segment. Like, Brian Kelly was there a lot, probably had the door closed a lot, probably not walking the halls quite as much. I'll tell you this, personal experience. Now, this is a very small sample size, very small. But I go to that facility on Friday mornings during the season, and I have a 3-minute conversation with an assistant coach. You hear it on the pregame show. I'm in there for some days I'm in there for 8 minutes. Some days I'm in there for 19 minutes, but it's very short. But I almost every single Friday saw Ed Ogeron walk in those halls. I never saw Brian Kelly once. Now that's, again, such a small sample size. He might be having recruiting conversations at that time. It's usually like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. He may have had something on his schedule. I'm just saying, like, I saw Les Miles up and down those halls. I saw Ed Ogeron up and down those halls. I didn't see Kelly as much. And then you hear now stories about the recruiting side of things where Kelly just wasn't as involved as some head coaches are. Sometimes didn't know names that he was supposed to know. That is one where you could point to and go, that's a problem. What I can't tell you is Brian Kelly's true intentions. It feels like it falls into one of these camps. It feels like it falls into one of these. It's either he thought, okay, I'm a great coach. Ogeron and Miles, I don't think a lot of. I'll go in there. I'll hire the people. I'll set the protocols up. And I've got this huge contract. They're not going to fire me or buy me out. Maybe it takes some time, but if I hang around there 6, 7, 8 years, we'll pop one of those teams. There's too many good players in Louisiana, too many people that care. I've got the money if I just hang around for 8 years, like, it'll pop. Or if he said, I've got $100 million. I'm a little bit tired. I thought I had it with the Jaden team. I didn't. I'm just going to collect the check and move forward without putting in the effort. I don't know which one of those it is. One of those is just a bad plan. One of it is just quitting. And I'm in no position to speculate on what Brian Kelly did there. I thought his effort in terms of trying to make changes showed during some of these off seasons where he fired and rehired coaches and put together a new personnel staff and got involved in the NIL thing and knew the people he was supposed to talk to for that. And it didn't feel like he just completely quit. But you hear the folks that he just wasn't quite as engaged. I don't know anything about the beach trip. I don't know anything about whether or not he was at practice. I just have a hard time believing that he stepped out on practice. I never heard that from anybody. My sincere guess on this is that because people are so unhappy with the results of his era that they're just very, very willing to accept every rumor as gospel, and they're just going to go on and accept all this stuff. I'm not quite in that camp. I'm not just going to assume the worst about every single conversation that happens. But he was not running this thing as personally as needs to be done. He was too much in an ivory tower, and why he was that way, I don't know. But it just feels like you've talked to enough people that that's generally the consensus. And because of that, ultimately, the culture didn't work and it fractured. You want to call that fit, you want to call that effort, you want to call that whatever you want. It just never quite worked. And I do think, and this is another guess, and I asked Wilson about it, he didn't want to speculate, and that's very fair. Kelly has not said a word, and usually coaches will come out and either say a thank you or to the players, fight hard or whatever. Kelly spoke to the players for what appeared to be about 3 minutes that Sunday evening and then was gone. And trust me, like I said this last Monday, you fire me and there's tens of millions of dollars on the hook, I'm going to be in Cabo by lunch the next day. Like I'm gone. I'm going to the golf course. Now I can put a Twitter post up from the golf course, but I'm gone. So, I don't expect him to be, hanging around or whatever, like James Franklin popped up on game day. I don't need that. That's a little bit above and beyond. But there will be more and more that is told about Brian Kelly's time as it moves forward. I've kind of got what I was looking for there. I don't have a motive, but you can kind of see that the coach wasn't involved with the people in the organization to the level that you would imagine a coach needs to be involved with the people to keep that culture where it needed to be. It doesn't mean he didn't care at all. It doesn't mean he completely mailed it in. He could have mailed it in and could have not cared. I don't know, but it doesn't mean that. But you got to be a little bit more hands-on than he was, and ultimately, I think that's what cost him here in Baton Rouge. Step aside, close out hour number 1 next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. Look, closet space can be a big deal. Sometimes you don't realize it. I had a home, loved it, loved the location. I liked the house. Girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, moved in. She looked like, this is the worst closet situation I've ever laid eyes on. I didn't even know. We had clothes jammed in the hallway, clothes up in the attic, clothes in suitcases, stuff in the other closets, in the other rooms. It was a bad deal. And we could have called David Duvall and One Bath and Closets and gotten that fixed, but we were moving, so we didn't do that. You don't have to move to improve your closet situation. Let David come in and put in a customized new closet situation in your home. It starts with a free consultation, and there's financing available on the back end if you qualify. 18 months, 0%. Check out the website. You can get that free consultation today. It's onebathandclosets.com. David Duvall and One Bath and Closets. Onebathandclosets.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Closing up hour number 1 here on this Monday. Time for Sports Health, presented by Auctioneer Andrews Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Institute. For that segment, every couple of weeks, we chat with Dr. Jeremy Burnham from Auctioneer. He joins us now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Dr. Burnham, thanks for the time. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, Hunt. Quite a bit's happened since last time we connected.
Unfortunately, it seems to be a bit of a recurring theme, but I guess that's why we have you. It's been a tough year, tough fall for former LSU stars in the NFL. Lost Joe Burrow early in the season to some turf toe. Malik Neighbors tore his ACL. Jaden Daniels has been hurt a couple of times, and last night saw a gruesome injury there with his elbow. What can you tell us about what you saw there?
Gosh, I think that was tough to watch, and with modern TV and all the angles, you really get a front row seat to what's going on. I think, it looked to me like the elbow hyperextended, and basically the elbow goes straight, but then when there's so much force that's put on that elbow, you could see he was falling and trying to brace his fall with his elbow, that it actually went past straight and it bent back in a direction that it shouldn't. Everything that I've seen from them, what they've released publicly about this, looks like he did not have a fracture, which is a good thing. So I think this is a different type of injury if he has a broken bone. Looks like it dislocated all the way, and so that means that it tore some soft tissues as well. But believe it or not, if there's not a fracture and it's his non-throwing arm, he may actually be able to get back and, actually play at some point this season. That's not outside the realm of possibility.
I think they'll probably take things slow with him, especially if it doesn't go very well for Washington over the next couple of weeks, because he is that franchise and a couple injuries here in this season. So scary stuff, but hopefully Jaden is back sooner rather than later. And we've talked in the past about a number of things with you, but one of the most fascinating conversations that we had was talking about surgical techniques with the knee and the C coral technique specifically. Can you tell us what the latest is on that and what they're looking at?
Yeah, Hunt, it's really an exciting time in orthopedics, and we're dealing with situations where we have technology and techniques that are available to us now to treat people's injuries that weren't available even just a few years ago. It seems like every year there's some new technology that's released that has really good outcomes, and we do a lot of sports medicine surgery here, but we also focus on something called knee preservation, and basically what that is we're trying to keep people's arthritis from progressing to the point that they need a knee replacement. And so some things in the past that we just had to kind of watch and let people modify their activities and then just wait till it got bad enough they needed a knee replacement, we actually now have some techniques and technologies that allow us to treat that. As we talked about, there's something called CartiHeal, which is based on, they actually utilize sea coral, and they've discovered that if you implant that in the knee when somebody has a hole in their cartilage, it actually encourages the body to fill that hole with cartilage. There's also something called the knee bar procedure now. There's a company called Osteofiber, and they make these screws that are made out of bone fiber. And so you can actually insert these in the bone when maybe the bone has a fracture or it's not holding up to stress like it should, and it gives some stability, but then the body just turns it completely in the bone over time, so you don't have to go back and take those implants out. And so there have really been some game changers. I think the key takeaway on this is, if you're having pain in your knee, and it lasts for more than 2 or 3 days, it's worth going and getting it checked out. Sometimes these things come in too late and they already have too bad of arthritis. But we're trying to stamp out arthritis and try to keep people from needing those knee replacements if possible. Sea
coral in the knee to help cartilage grow. That's crazy. The thing I can remember the most about our conversations is that technique there, because it just blew my mind. I was on Burbank yesterday, drove right on by Elite. I know football is in full swing, getting down to the home stretch. Soccer, youth basketball coming up as well. So tell the folks what's going on over at Elite.
So, Hunt, we have this walk-in clinic, orthopedic walk-in clinic over here. We're open 7 days a week. Obviously, there's a flurry of activity always going on around us, but it's really accessible. You get to it right off of Burbank, drive right in. You don't need an appointment. You can just come in and get checked out if you need to. So we try to make it as convenient as possible.
That's awesome. Dr. Burnham, we appreciate the time. We'll talk in a couple of weeks.
Have a great one. Thank you.
Sure will. Dr. Jeremy Burnham with Ochsner at Ochsner Andrews Sports Medicine Institute. We know that sports injuries can be unpredictable. One situation you can protect yourself from, though, is muscle cramping. One of the first things you can do to aid in recovery to avoid muscle cramping is to stretch prior to and at the end of your activity. Not drinking enough fluids can also lead to muscle cramps, so be sure to stay hydrated even as the temperatures cool off. To learn more about sports injury prevention and treatment, visit ochsner.org/BRortho. Finishing up here in hour number one, that Jaden Daniels injury was such a bummer last night. That Washington defense is awful. They just simply cannot get stops. They had no chance against Seattle in the first half. As a Sam Darnold fantasy guy, I went from like 30 points down to in the lead today. That was good. The Washington defense was not good. And you look at what Cincinnati and Washington have surrounded those two Heisman Trophy quarterbacks with, and it's really disappointing because they're just not good enough. Washington struggled, but they finally got Terry McLaurin signed, and you thought, okay, that offense is going to be humming, and the offense has been okay, even though Daniels has missed some time, but the defense has just been a sieve, and the Bengals defense is awful. They gave up nearly 50 points with Joe Flacco humming it around against the Bears. It's sad that those two have found themselves in spots that can't seem to surround them with the right talent, and it's really sad that they can't stay healthy. So hopefully, Jaden wants to run, and he's not very big. It's hard to run a lot in that league, and he's paying for it a little bit this year. So hopefully they take it easy with him. If he can come back, we'll see it. But it's just been a bummer of a fall. Like, I could go all pessimistic on you here about how LSU's season is spiraling out of control, and the Saints are maybe the worst team in the league, and Burrow's hurt, and Daniels is hurt, and Neighbors is hurt. And, like, it's a sad state of affairs. And you can toss the Pelicans right on in there if you want. It's not great in South Louisiana currently from a football or basketball perspective, that's for sure. But we keep on keeping on. LSU women's basketball tomorrow starts the season. Hopefully they're really good. LSU men's basketball crank things up on Wednesday. Hopefully they make a push here. We'll see. Hope springs eternal, I guess. But got a lot to get to in hour number 2. If you missed any of hour number 1, I just have had it with Mickey Loomis, and yesterday was kind of my breaking point. I talked about it at the top of the show. Wilson Alexander, good enough to give us a little bit of time talking about Brian Kelly's time at LSU. He has a great piece on theadvocate.com about Brian Kelly's relationships in that building and kind of what may have led to the demise of his era. So you can catch that on demand, Hunt on LSU. Then we, of course, had our segment there with Dr. Jeremy Burnham. We'll step aside for national headlines with SportsCenter. Lots to get to in hour number 2, including Denton Day.
The Hunt Palmer Show